And indeed, today I will talk about some of the work my group and I have been doing over the past years on fluid flow and fracture. And please don't be confused. It's not only about hydraulic fracturing or fracking. That's one possible application, but there are many cases where fluid flow is important, or where you have, for instance, waste which can pollute groundwater, and all these kind of things. When you have fractures in your skin, also there you have cases of fluid flow in fractured or fracturing porous medium. I would like to acknowledge my present and former PhD students and postdocs, Tim Hageman, Per Fatima, Julien Rétoré, and Julien Figueret, who have greatly contributed to this work. Now, what is the aim of our work? Well, we want to model the propagation of cracks. We want to do that in a porous medium. We want to include explicitly the possibility of mass transport in the cracks. We just don't want to limit ourselves to a single crack tip, but want to consider larger domains with possibly more cracks. We would not like to have the thing biased by the initial discretization. And we would have to have a formulation that is general enough to extend to multi-phase cases, non-returning fluids, and all these things which are practical, but which not always addressed. So what's the approach we are taking? Well, this is the approach. Here we have, at the mesoscale, our medium. We consider a fracture here, and there is some mesh coming from whatever discretization techniques, and this is at the moment considered to be regular. And then we zoom out, we take a zoom here, we zoom out and we move to a subgrid scale. And on this subgrid scale, we take an elementary volume where here we have mass flowing in and flowing out in the crack, and also fluid flowing in the crack, flowing out of the crack, and possibly storage of fluid in the crack. So we set up essentially the mass and momentum balances on this subgrid scale, and then upscale it to the next higher scale, the mesoscale, at which we do our computations. Now, for the beginning, we will take it simple. So we will have small strains. We will have a linear relation between the stress rate and the strain rate for the porous, and we have a standard compressibility relation to the strain. With here our tangent bulk modulus, and here the bulk modulus for the solid grains. First, and we will later extend it, we will take a bio approach, where we here simply have a Newtonian fluid, so that our fluid stress is equal to minus some bio coefficient times the pressure. And we augment that by a Darcy relation, so that we have a linear relation between the relative fluid flow, so the fluid flow minus the solid, the movement of the solid particles, equals minus some permeability times the gradient of the pressure. And then we augment that with this standard relation for the fluid, with here some bulk modulus for the fluid. Now, what we have to do, obviously, we have to set up not only the mass and the momentum balances at the subgrid scale, but also at the mesoscale. So at the mesoscale, we have our balances of momentum for each of the phases, with a possible exchange of the momentum between the phases, which should obviously be equal to 0, plus a balance of the mass for each of them. Yes, the error reversed, sorry. When you add the balances of momentum for the different phases, you end up with the balance of momentum for the mixture. And you end up with the balance of mass for the mixture. Now, in a standard way, you can cast that into a weak format, which is the starting point for most of your discretization technologies. So you get a number of terms here for the momentum balance, this one, which are standard ones. Here we have our standard right-hand side, and here we have the balance of mass for the mixture in the weak format with all standard terms. So everything is standard, except for the underlined parts. And the underlined parts appear due to the fact that we have here the possibility that we explicitly allow for the possibility of an internal discontinuity in our medium. So here you see the jump of the traction over the discontinuity, so over the crack. And here you see the jump of the mass over the crack. And we need that to have this inflow minus outflow is equal to what flows in the crack, plus storage minus what flows out. And for that, we now have to go to a subgrid scale. But first, we have to see whether we can simplify things. And we can, because we can assume that we have traction continuity across the crack. Either we have a linear elastic friction mechanics where we have no solid stresses, or we have a cohesive structure which entails that. So we can get this out of the jump term. And here we have then the traction between the solid particles and the fluid pressure. And here we can do something similar. We get a test function out for the pressure. We get a porosity out, and we end up with the test function times the porosity times the jump in the relative velocity of the fluid orthogonal to the crack. So essentially, this is nothing than the difference of what flows in from the surrounding porous medium up minus what flows out. And that should be equal, of course, to storage plus what is transported inside the crack. Well, you see that here. We now go to our subscale model for flow inside the crack, or the shear zone. So we have a mass balance again, but now inside this cavity. And here you see it. We take the simple case where we have where you have virtually incompressible fluid phase, which is fair considering the fact that the movements in this crack are usually fast compared to the movements outside. And from that, we can get the jump in the fluid velocity as the integral from the bottom to the top of the fluid integrated in the horizontal sense. And from that, you can integrate further and you get your fluid velocity in the direction along the crack as 1 over 2 times the viscosity, your pressure gradient in the direction of the crack, and next you have your parabolic profile, as you would expect for Stokes. Of course, the devil is always in the boundary conditions. So this is the fluid velocity of the interstitial fluid at the borders of this cavity. Now, you can insert it, and then you end up with an equation of the porosity times the relative fluid velocity, which equals this somewhat nasty term. And actually, it's quite familiar. So after I derived it, I detected that some 100 years ago, Reynolds had done something very similar. And this is essentially very similar to Reynolds' equation, where you derive a two-dimensional equation from a three-dimensional Navier-Stokes equations. Also there, you have the cubic dependence on the height of the fraction, which is nasty, because although we started with a linear model, everything was linear, we now get a nonlinearity. Another thing is that you see that the pressure gradient here, the pressure here is the second derivative. And here you have some other terms, but they are a little bit less nice. So the consequence of this upscaling of the cavity to the mesoscale is that you have nonlinearity, even though you may have full nonlinearity for the crack, or for the solid and for the fluid. That you have a higher order interpolation needed for your pressure. And because this goes to the mass balance and not to the momentum balance, that you get a non-symmetry in your set of coupled mass momentum balances. So that's the downside. The upside is that you can now compute relatively large domains. And how do you do that? Because we have now done the subgrid scale model, but you still have to do something for the kinematics, for the solid, and for the pressure for the fluid. You have to make some assumptions on your interpolation in order that you make this possible, that you enable this. So for the solid, we simply have that the displacement is equal to displacement at one side of your fracture plus a jump, a Heaviside function, times another one. So essentially, this gives you a jump in displacement. Now for the fluid, the simplest possible assumption you can make, and that's the one that is commonly made, is that you have a signed distance function which separates the pressure at one side of the fracture and the pressure at the other side of the fracture. So you multiply this pressure field by a signed distance function. Here, something like this. And the interesting thing is that if you differentiate it, then you get your gradient for the pressure, which is the gradient of the pressure at one side of the fracture, plus the Heaviside function times the gradient at the other side of the fracture. So what you now have is that you have a jump in the pressure gradient. Now, and since in your Darcy model, the relative fluid velocity is directly proportional to your jump to your pressure gradient, you also allow now for a jump in your fluid velocity over your crack. And therefore you allow to accommodate this subgrid scale. Obviously, when you would here assume a discontinuity for the pressure, you still get it, but this is the simplest possible possibility. Now, this is an example of such a calculation. Here we have a square with a crack here, and for the time being, we don't allow this crack to propagate. And we vary the angle of this crack. We put a fluid, impose fluid velocity here. We have some boundary conditions here and here, and we have a zero pressure condition at the top. Well, obviously, if you put this crack horizontal, so alpha is equal to 0, then you get this, which is it, I can't properly see it from here, but you get this, the line where you have the same profile in both sides. So you get indeed this red line. So the peak here, the bottom here, is as much as the peak here above the zero. The more and more you incline it, the more and more you would expect that fluid is transported within the crack, rather than diffused. And indeed you see that for the light blue line, where you have an inclination angle of 40 degrees, you see that there's hardly fluid transported in this direction, but you get almost all convective transport in the crack. Also what you see is that the fluid velocity is several orders of magnitude in the fracture here, is several orders of magnitude higher than the flow of the interstitial fluid in the porous medium. And the term which you use, this complicated term, has some importance. Here you see the velocity profile when you don't have this term. So when you don't have microflow in this cavity. And you see that, well, the fluid doesn't see the cavity. It just flows in and it flows out. On the contrary, when you include this term, you see fluid flowing in and much less flowing out, and this is transported in this direction. Now, the simple case was for the fluid to assume that our pressure is separated from one side of the fracture to the other side of the fracture by a sign distance function. So by this relation. In that case, we have a note degrees of freedom for the displacement here and here, and the pressure degree of freedom only here. Obviously, you can go more complicated. You can, for instance, have independent pressure degrees of freedom here and here, which allows for a jump. I will show that this does not give very much physical relevance. The physical relevant case is, however, this one, where you have displacement degrees of freedom here and here, so at each side of the fracture, and have pressure degrees of freedom at one side of the porous medium, at another side, and an independent pressure degree of freedom for the flow inside the fracture. Now, this is a case that is, for instance, very relevant for hydraulic fracture, because there you are pressurizing the crack, and typically your pressure inside the crack is different from that of the surrounding porous medium. The expressions become a little bit different. This was the one we had for a single degree of freedom. Since we don't have a pressure degree of freedom for 2 degrees of freedom model inside the fluid, it all collapses to a simple case like here. You can only transport fluid across the crack, but not along the crack. And when you have 3 degrees of freedom, the right-hand side is maintained, but here you now have an independent pressure degree of freedom for the fluid inside the crack, and pressures at the bottom and the top side. Well, this is an example of a case where we have pressurized a crack. So we insert fluid here at this point. We have an initial crack here of, well, it's a toy problem, only 50 millimeters, and we then propagate the crack. Well, in this case, you clearly see that, as you would expect, there's no difference if you have a single degree of freedom for the pressure and 3 degrees of freedom with a little, well, with a large permeability between the crack and the surrounding medium. When you increase that, you get differences, and the more of an impervious layer you have, a filter cake you have, then you get higher and higher differences. You can also extend this to non-Newtonian fluid. In fact, blood is non-Newtonian. Most of the fluids in our body are quite a few are non-Newtonian. The fluid that is used to pressurize a crack during hydraulic friction is non-Newtonian. So it's a practically very relevant case. So here we have looked into a power law fluid. Here our viscosity is a base viscosity times our shear to a power n minus 1. Obviously, for n equals 1, we get our Newtonian fluid back. For n smaller than 1, we have a shear thinning fluid, technically the most relevant case. For n greater than 1, we have a shear thickening fluid, which is a little bit less relevant in applications. Well, equations become a tiny bit more complicated. So Darcy's law now becomes something like this, with here the permeability, here the pressure gradient to 1 over n minus 1 times the pressure gradient again. And you have this Kf star, which is an effective permeability and which is also a pretty nasty expression. Also, your velocity profile stops to be parabolic. You get a more complicated one. And your wall slip velocity also becomes a little bit more. But you can all do it, and it's in principle straight forward, in principle. You just shouldn't make any calculation errors. Recently, we have also extended this to a case of multiple fluids, and then it becomes even a little bit more tricky to not make errors. Now, this is a case of a non-Newtonian power law fluid. We have essentially the same case as before. So we have the fracture here, and here we see the profiles for various values of n. And this is for a certain permeability, but what you see is that it is very important to include that because the velocity or the velocity profiles are very much dependent on your power law. And indeed, in this case, if I remember well, we have the smallest velocities for a shear thinning fluid and the largest one for shear thickening fluid. If you go to a very much less permeable fluid, so to k to the power minus 12, then this whole picture reverses. So you get a completely different picture. So there's a very strong interplay, it appears, between the permeability and the fluid velocity, and therefore also between the permeability, the fluid viscosity, or whether it is Newtonian or not, and the propagation velocity of your fracture. Another thing here is that you see that our velocities are nicely smooth. And that's a little bit surprising because we have interpolated our pressure. Our pressure gradient is therefore normally, if you use finite elements, discontinuous. Well, we have here a continuous profile. As I will come back to a bit later, this is because we have here used high order isogeometric spline shape functions which allow you for smooth profiles, also for derived quantities. Well, I said that your velocity, your profile now can become quite a bit dependent on your power law index. And here you see that for, again, the same case, injection of fluid velocity here. And what you see here is depending on your power law index, you get quite different profiles at the same moment in time. Also, your pressure profile becomes very different depending on power law and also depending on the permeability of the surrounding fluid. Now, I talked a little bit also in the beginning about one of the aims being able to be independent of the mesh. Well, one of the possibilities there is to use the extended finite element method. And we have used that. Essentially, what you do is you take your displacement. Here you have your normal interpolation polynomials times your normal degrees of freedom, and you add some tailor-made functions for your problem. And in this case, we do that by a Heaviside function at the discontinuity times the Heaviside function for the displacement. And this sign distance function for the pressure. And then you can compute on structured grids. For instance, this was computed here for a single fracture. It's linearistic fracture mechanics what we use here, so we have a stationary crack. Here for 10 cracks which were randomly generated on a structured grid of 40 by 40 quadratic structured elements. So here you see, again, we have inflow here, we have no flow here, we have a zero pressure condition here. And you see that here the larger cracks attract the most fluid, and for instance, they also shield the smaller cracks. You can do that also, for instance, for shear band formation in soils. And here I have a case of a dynamic loading, and using a Coulomb criterion for friction. Here we have dynamic loading at the top. There is an imperfection here, and here you see the results for the displacement. The dynamic propagation of the shear, including flow. Now here you see the evolution of the pressure and the pressure waves that are there. And when you make the friction higher, so the friction along this shear band, you make it higher, then you get a phenomenon that this shear band is arrested at some point and nucleates a little bit further down. You see it's arrested here and it nucleates here again. Now, the last part of the talk, I talked a little bit also about the necessity to have smoothness in the derived quantities. And effectively, as engineers concerned about structural integrity, we should, and I think we are, more concerned about stresses than about displacements. So it's effectively very desirable that our stresses are smooth. Now, you all know that this is not normally the case for finite elements. You interpolate the displacements, and you have the stresses as derived quantities, which are non-smooth and pretty messy, usually around crack tips. Well, you can also use, instead of the normal Lagrangian functions, you can use B-splines or non-uniform rational B-splines as simply as they are used in CAD programs. And for linear case, they are the same. For quadratic case, they already start to be different. Here you see the standard polynomials. Here the red, the green, the blue are the B-splines. Now, the advantages are that you can have them smoother, and also that you can lower the order of continuity and therefore insert discontinuities. Now this is an example again of a fluid situated porous medium. Here you see the velocities for a standard finite element. And here you see the smooth velocity profile for splines, with only 3 splines. Now, I think that the chairman is quickly coming, so I skip a few things. I just want to tell you one thing. In many cases, these techniques are more useful. In some cases, not. And one of them is, for instance, in fluid-saturated porous medium. Indeed, we all know that you have to interpolate pressures differently, lower order than displacements. And in finite elements, that's now well established. You start with the displacement field and derive the pressure field such that it's small overlap. Here you have to do it exactly the opposite. You have to start with the pressure field and upgrade to a displacement field which is 1 order higher. Another problem is when you use interface elements for fracture. We know that you can use Newton-Cotes integration in standard interface elements. If you use isogeometric interface elements, that doesn't work, and you have to go to lumped integration. But then again, it works. Here you see standard ways, and the blue curve is for the lumped integration. So, when you are going to look into large-scale computations for fluid flow in fractured or fracturally porous media, I think there is a need for subgrid scalars. We have looked into the pressure interpolation, and for many cases, a simple interpolation is sufficient. When you go to the industrially relevant case of hydraulic friction, it may not be the case. You can do this using conventional interface elements. But then you need to adapt the mesh. This is no longer the case with extended finite elements. And with isogeometric finite elements, you even have a smoothness of your derived quantities, your stresses, and your pressure gradients. Therefore, in this case, you have the advantage of a local preservation of mass, and also that you can approximate the higher order pressure gradients which are needed in this kind of calculations. But the nasty thing is that you have to be a bit careful and a bit more difficult regarding the unequal interpolation of your pressure displacement. Thank you very much.